So thank you everybody for dialing in to take two of our public buildings and infrastructure client launch. Take two, because as I'm sure some of you are aware, we tried to do it on the 18th, which was the day of the big storm, and a number of our internets went completely down on that day. So just slightly worried. It is quite windy today, but we all have backups in that case, so we should be able to continue on. So without further ado, just to say this is our launch and this is the agenda. Just a quick intro from me saying hello. Then we're going to have Dawn Jevons from Galliford Try, one of our companies appointed to the framework, talking to us about social responsibility and positive outcomes. Then I'm going to do some nuts and bolts of the framework and how to use it. Rather a lot of slides, but I'll whiz over them quite quickly. And then Peter Everett from Kier is going to be talking about incorporating MMC into your designs. So I hope you find it enjoyable. There is a Q&A button down the bottom. So if you want to put any questions in there, please do, and we'll answer them at the end. We hope we enjoy a lively discussion. And of course, we will be recording this. You will be sent out the recording in a pack later in the week with all the information, and the brochure is on our website if you want to have a look at it in more detail. So without further ado, I think I've said everything, probably have forgotten something. I'll pass over to Dawn, who will take us through her bit of the session. Thank you, Dawn.
Right, lovely. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, we can, Dawn, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. Right, so somebody's controlling the slides for me, aren't they? That's lovely. So good morning, my name's Dawn Jevons and I'm the Regional Corporate Social Responsibility Manager for Galliford Try across the South West and the West Midlands. And I'm here today, obviously, to tell you a bit more about Galliford Try's approach to social value. So we always, is the next slide, sorry, please. Okay. So we always embed social value into all of our projects, and it doesn't matter whether the value of the project is 5 million or 50 million. We do this to leave a lasting legacy, not only with the buildings that we have constructed for our client, but to ensure we leave a positive, lasting legacy for the communities in which we have been working. However, since the government's procurement policy note and the construction playbook came out, social value is now even higher on the agenda than ever before, and it's also a very effective way for our clients to achieve more from their procurement. When we undertake a new project, my role is to work in partnership with our client to identify their key priorities and the key priorities of the local community. We undertake a bespoke place-based needs analysis for the local area in relation to social and demographic factors, which include employment and training opportunities, apprenticeships, use of local SMEs, voluntary organisations and social enterprises, plus school and college engagement with work experience, careers advice, mock interviews, site visits, that sort of thing. This analysis is then used to develop and deliver our social value community employment and skills plan. We also look at how we can support residents and community wellbeing in the local area as being part of being a good neighbour. And we are partners of the Considerate Constructors scheme. So we measure and monitor our social value engagement via the social value portal using the national TOMs. This is then also reported to board level and reviewed by our stakeholder steering committee, as well as on the ongoing monthly reviews that I hold with the site team. So that's an addition to that. Advantage to Alignment is a unique initiative devised by our business. Aligned subcontractors are given a dedicated point of contact within our business to support them and help improve communication. This includes access to our award-winning behavioural safety programme, Challenging Beliefs Affecting Behaviour. To support engagement and supply chain sustainability, we also give a forward view of our pipeline to the supply chain. Social value KPIs are built into all contracts to help support local employment and community engagement. And via our supply chain sustainability, I can never say this, and via our supply chain sustainability school gold membership, We offer our supply chain free training for things such as sustainability, BIM, upskilling their workforce and much more. So next slide, please. Lovely. So today I thought I'd share with you the work that we've been doing on one of our live projects, that's Perry Barr Station. So Perry Barr has a value of 10 million and is a 64-week project. It's part of the ongoing work for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and the station is close to the Alexander Stadium, which will host the athletics and the para-athletics events. And it's also key to the transport offering for people attending the Commonwealth Games. The station is also key to a 40-year regeneration programme that's being planned for Perry Barr, so it's a really important little station. It's not huge, but it's very important. Locally, this is also an extremely important site, and we have many VIP visits, including local councillors and the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor, Andy Street. Okay. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd show you some of the community engagements that we've had on this project. The project is still ongoing. We will be ending shortly, but we're still engaging with the local community. So we have had a number of work placement opportunities on site, and the photographs that I've used, by the way, on these slides are from the site. So the work placements that we've done, we've had armed forces. As an ex-military friendly organisation, we're proud to have pledged our commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant, Corporate Covenant, since 2016. And on this site, we've welcomed an Armed Forces work experience candidate, and he's been with us, he was with us for 2 weeks. Some of the local colleges that we've engaged with, we've had a couple of students from WMG Academy for Young Engineers, each of whom they've spent a week on site each. They're young students from 16 years of age. We've had a chemistry student from a local university who, in her first year of the first year of her course, she decided that chemistry wasn't for her, so she thought construction might be. However, she wasn't too sure which discipline would suit her, so she joined us for a 2-week work placement. And I must admit, she was absolutely fantastic, and the site were really pleased with her. And so we have offered her a traineeship, and I'm happy to say she'll be joining us as a trainee quantity surveyor in September. So that's a really good outcome. We've also got on site a training hub. So we work with a local partner, a company called RMF Training. We've had over 50 candidates on site so far. This opportunity is really useful for the candidates because it gives them an idea of what it's like to work on a live site, especially for a tier 1 construction company. We also now have a T-level student on this site, and I'm sure a lot of you will have heard of T-levels, but it's a new government initiative, and the T stands for technical. We're a partner with Thomas Telford UTC in Wolverhampton. And this partnership originated a couple of years ago from when we built the Wolverhampton train station. And it's a prime example of how continuing lasting legacy works for the local community. As even though the project finished 2 years ago, we now have a permanent relationship with the UTC. We've taken on a 16-year-old student, Elliot, from there, and he will be on placement with us for the next 2 years. He'll spend 80% of his time at college and 20% on site. He'll be a meaningful member of the team, and we're hoping that once he's finished his college and T-level placement, he will join us as a technical apprentice/traineeship. Each of our sites choose a local charity that they'd like to support when we're in an area, and Perry Barr chose Birmingham Children's Hospital charity. It's a charity that's quite close to a lot of people's hearts in the Midlands, as a lot of us with children have used it over the years. And the site have raised over £7,500 so far for the hospital, which is just fantastic. With the hoardings around Perry Barr, we did some local paintings with the Birmingham Children's Hospital School, and they've been embedded into the hoarding. This hospital school is part of the James Brindley Academy, and they have a number of different offerings across the city. Again, this is an ongoing permanent relationship from a previous project in Birmingham, so another prime example of how we leave a lasting legacy in our communities. We also did an open doors site visit, and this was the first one that we did in person after COVID. And again, James Brindley Academy were the school that we used. And the students on this visit were from the Academy's neurodiverse offering. They support a lot of people, young people with behavioural difficulties, with mental health issues, with neurodiversity. And again, that's part of our relationship with the Academy. And we're really working to try and overcome barriers for young people that struggle with these issues into employment. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what we do. This is obviously just the one site, and it's still ongoing at the moment. So we still have a few things left that we will be doing. And if you've got any questions when we come to that, I'll be happy to answer. I hope that's okay.
Thank you, Dawn. It's great to hear how one of our key contractors on the framework is taking social responsibility so seriously and applying it to every site they work on. I'm now going to talk a bit about the nuts and bolts of the actual framework. And just to start off, I mean, one of the things, to put it in context, now is a very exciting time, if you like, for frameworks and the analysis of frameworks. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the publication that's recently been produced on the gold standard for frameworks and what should frameworks offer and what is best practice in frameworks. And as a national organisation, we certainly inputted into all the consultation on that. But I just wanted to highlight that some of the features that are in this framework, the PB3 framework, that sort of ring true and are part of what are the recommendations of the gold standard for frameworks. And really it's around collaboration. We see our projects delivered through the frameworks as being very much a collaboration between ourselves, the clients, and the companies, the suppliers are delivering those projects. We do use the Framework Alliance Contract 1. We've always used it as a partnering and alliancing contract that joins together our various parties to the framework, and I'll talk a bit more about that. We do have the facility for pre-construction services in our framework documents, and I think that is very much a useful way to go forward. And we also have within the framework documentation some should cost models and target pricing, and I'll talk a bit more about them. If I could have the next slide, please, Emily. So what makes this framework user-friendly? Well, it is suitable for many different types of contract, and the values, the work lots vary between 0 to up to over 50 million. So it can be used, as I say, for small one-off projects, individual clients, maybe with a one-off contract. It can be used for refurbishment at all levels and for larger, more innovative projects. And there are detailed specifications and references in the pricing model to sector standards, so very much there for each sector. And as I say, the pricing model can be used as a pick up and go. You know, you can see all the prices, they're very detailed in there, and I know the people filling them in sort of curse us because we do, that's one of the feature of all our frameworks, we have some very detailed pricing models, or as the basis for a two-stage tender exercise. So if I can go on the next slide, please. Yeah, so just talking about the Framework Alliance contract, we've been using this on all our framework contracts across the spectrum. And it is the alliance contract that's between us and the suppliers appointed to the framework. And it talks around the duties and the responsibilities of both parties, what should be done. And what happens is when a client wants to use one of our framework companies, they just join informally as part of that alliancing, and the terms are in there in the operation of the framework. We can send that to people. Our amendments, we have specific amendments and schedules and appendices that are very detailed on the operation of the framework, that we send out to people. Obviously the primary contract is copyright to the ACA, and there is a link there as to how you can get hold of it there. Particularly in the appendices, it talks about the methodologies for call-off, direct award and mini competition, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. Could I have the next slide? So the structure of our public buildings and infrastructure framework is as we've set out here. There are 6 value bands, lots, and then it's divided up into geographical areas. Just to say that in the geographical areas, we have the southwest and sometimes broken down into more detail, but these are the value bands. And our 2 companies who are speaking here today are represented in some of the value bands and not others, but I'll show you more detail about that. We'd like to go on to the next slide. So just in terms of the specifications, I said that within our framework documentation, within the technical specifications, it very much references all the current standards for public buildings and infrastructure. So it refers to all the Education Funding Agency building bulletins, technical annexes, and we also have reference to the special educational needs and provisions there. So it's all very much set out. So it's not a case of you as a client saying we'd like to use this framework and then people saying, oh, but that's not covered in the specifications. We have put in those detailed requirements in all the specifications and are happy to share those with you if you so desire. Next one, so that's the education buildings. The next slide, please, Emily. Yes, all the health building notes and health building requirements are in there, and there are referenced in the pricing frameworks as well. Could we have the next slide? Just whizzing through. Community buildings, lots and lots of the guidance notes there. As I say, they're all referred to within the specifications and are covered by this framework. Next one, please. In terms of the selection and evaluation for the framework, we used a restricted tender process. So the first stage was the stage 1 covered by the PAS 91, the pass-fail and the standard due diligence processes. And then on to stage 2, tenderers were selected on the basis of the most economically advantageous tender. And that was a 75% quality and a 25% price applied to each regional lot. And the quality was split into 4 sections: general quality, regional capability, workstream specific questions, and a factory assessment. Can we go on to the next slide? Just in a bit more detail, you can't see this, but we've got it in our documentation. But just, you know, this is our scoring mechanism. This is just to demonstrate that we are very diligent and very detailed in our analysis of all our selection process. So you know, these were some of the key areas that were followed. Obviously, low energy and zero carbon buildings and the cladding and passive fire protection of great interest to people in the current environment. Next slide, please, Em. So yes, the tender and pricing structure that we always have a very detailed, in all our frameworks, a very detailed pricing analysis. And this is where you know, as I say, clients can do a pick up and go if they want to do a direct award, or they can use the pricing analysis as a basis for further digging, detailed analysis of pricing, but it is there. So we have a separate specification and schedule of rates for each work stream that I've talked about previously. And the prices cover all lots, and we look at overheads and profits, meter squared rates for different building types. Then we have some standard construction items. We do a scenario pricing, and we do a schedule of preliminary items. And then we bring, as part of the analysis, we bring it all together to look at some scenarios, some project scenarios. If you want to go on to the next slide, this is just sort of some of our standard documentation of, as I say, overheads and profits. We have those, and useful for if you're wanting to do a 2-stage tender process, you know, to have an idea of what the standard overheads and profits are right up front, the management fees. If you want to come on to the next slide, this is just showing you that some of the building rates per meter squared, we have them for different types of buildings, and then the other bit of the slide has around some of the standard construction items that we get costed in, and we cost them in, as you can see on the far right of each of those little snippets. You can see that we do them for each lot and value, because obviously the rates will probably vary according to the lots. Can we go on to the next slide? And this is around the preliminaries. We've defined preliminaries as in the NRM2 RICS new rules. So we've been very clear about it because we have had in the past some discussions with people about what is included in preliminaries. So we're very clear about we're using those new rules of measurement there for what is considered in the preliminaries. If you'd like to go on to the next slide, please. So who's on the framework? Who's on the framework in the Southwest? And the Southwest is defined by the map here: Bath, Bristol, Wiltshire, Gloucester, Dorset, Somerset, Devon and Cornwall. And those are the K3, K4, K2 and K1 are the areas that are defined in the procurement regulations. So we have a really good mix of people who are regional contractors, a couple of national contractors, but we're very pleased that these are the companies that have passed all our rigorous selection process and taken the time and the effort to fill in all our very lengthy pricing documents and quality questionnaires. But yes, some really good people there on the framework. If you want to go on to the next slide. And this is who's appointed to each work stream. We have divided it down into the UKK areas, so you'll see, although you'll see a lot of similarity between some of the areas, and in some cases the more regionally based contractors only wanted to apply for certain regions. So here we have them all broken down into the various lot sizes and areas. As I say, this will be sent out to you, so if you want to go on to the next slide, Emily. Yes, this is the next one in Cornwall and Devon. We do find, obviously, Cornwall, most people understand the logistics down there, so it's often you get less interest in Cornwall. Fact of life, where I'm not sure whether I want them to upgrade the A30 to a motorway, because then there'll be more people coming up and down into a beautiful part of the country. But anyway, enough said. Next slide, please. So as I say, using the framework, you can either do a mini competition of all the relevant people on that relevant lot in that relevant area, and ask them all to fill in a reduced mini tender exercise, or you can do a direct award, and there are various criteria set out in the Framework Alliance contract for direct award. Obviously the most traditional ones, or the most understandable ones, are quality, top in quality, price, but there's also about having done previous contracts, using designs developed by somebody else. So I mean, it is all very much a discussion if somebody wants to do a direct award, and at the end of the day, as long as the client and their legal and financial due diligence are happy with the justification for a direct award, then that is considered to be relevant for us. If you want to go on to the next slide. So as I say, using the framework is very much a collaborative process. We would discuss that you discuss your projects and program with our client team, and we will obviously, you know, we'll talk to the relevant contractors and suppliers, you know, getting some idea about their capacity. We do know what their capacity is, but it's no good sort of a client coming to us and saying we want to do this project as quick as possible, and you know, the contractor being absolutely stacked out and not able to deliver that within the timeframes mentioned. We're happy to do soft market testing, you know, doing some indicative discussions with suppliers to see whether they are interested, what they think the particular risks are, what they think maybe some ballpark figures are, you know, just before a client decides to really go for it, and use that. And as I say, two-stage, you know, very much on larger projects would be recommended, or recommended on all. It does lead to further discussions, further opportunities for using contractor supplier expertise to think about design processes, maybe specification changes and value engineering. So Also, on deciding the best route, you might want to discuss with framework providers some specific requirements. What are your particular drop dead requirements? You will then need to register the project, and then we would do a formal expression of interest to all relevant framework providers. Either if you want to do a direct award to somebody, then we would just talk to that one individual supplier, but you will probably have been having discussions with them anyway, or all of the relevant suppliers if it's a mini competition. Thank you. Can we go on to the next slide? Yeah, so it doesn't stop for us once you've appointed a company through either direct award or mini competition. We will provide you with assistance both in a mini tender and a direct award, and we have developed some standard mini tender documentation that you're welcome to use. I mean, obviously all clients have their own specific specifications and requirements, so we work with you on those. We provide on-site support, troubleshooting if there's an issue, maybe there's some relationship issues, maybe some misconceptions about specifications. And we are beginning very much to look at the social value. I think Dawn mentioned the TOMS toolkit. We've been sort of looking at that, working with clients to develop some social value assessments at the call-off stage going forward. Can I have the next slide? So just finally from us, marketing and social media, we do a lot on marketing, promotion, social media. We're very happy to promote projects. We talk about news stories with our companies. We talk about all sorts of things. We have a very active website. I think last month we had 7 blogs and 6 news articles go up on various things relevant to the sector. Thank you. Next slide. And this is the team. This is the team that works out of our Exeter office at Partridge House, Kenford, just off the A38. We're there about 2 or 3 days a week, but you have all the contact details there. Thanks very much. I think that's me done, is it not? And so I'd like to pass over to Peter from Kier, who's going to talk about do a lightning introduction to MMC. So thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Mary. Yes, good morning, everybody. As Mary said, I'm Peter Everett. I'm Senior Pre-Construction Manager for Kier. I look after the Devon and Cornwall region. And my views on the A30 are probably slightly different to Mary's when I'm trying to get down to my projects in Cornwall. But there we go. I'm going to do a very quick 15 minutes. Next slide, please, Emily. Just covering some of the definitions around modern methods of construction, looking at some of the categories, how we categorize MMC, looking at some of the benefits, then how we implement that MMC strategy at Kier, and provide you with some examples. So there's lots to get through. Let's click on them, please, Emily. So starting off with a couple of definitions, MMC, modern methods of construction, is a bit of an all-encompassing term, which picks up all sorts of different types of construction, whether it's 3D volumetric, as you can see in the top picture there, or using components as the operative at the bottom picture on the left-hand side there, as with a precast staircase. That's still defined as a modern method of construction. You might have heard DFMA, or Design for Manufacturing Assembly. And again, this is the approach that our design teams take to make sure that the buildings are designed so they can be assembled on site and essentially incorporate that design more effectively. You've got platform design for manufacturing assembly, which is the sort of panacea where we're all trying to head towards. And there's some great videos online about how businesses have adopted platform design, essentially looking at a building in terms of a kit of parts, whether it's an office, a hospital, a school, or any other building, and saying essentially it's made up with components. So a standard column, standard beam, a standard floor, a standard facade, all linked together, but then kitted out to fulfill the function of that building. Next slide, please. The last couple of definitions, OSM, or off-site manufacturing. Again, that's a term referred to whether it's built in a factory, or it may even be in a tent next door, as I'll come on to later in this presentation. And then PMV, one of the sort of more new acronyms, or pre-manufactured value. Often we find, particularly with healthcare projects, there is a predetermined pre-manufactured value where our clients are looking at making sure that we've adopted a truly MMC approach and might be setting benchmarks of 60, 65, 70% of pre-manufactured value. And we've got tools that we can use to demonstrate that. Next slide, please. So MMC categories, you just click load these all up, please, Emily, that'd be great. So as you can see, there are 7 or 8 if we include design and briefing. We'll cover the main ones really. 3D structures is category 1. So this is your 3D volumetric, perhaps a prefabricated plant room, something like that. Then we've got 2D structures, category 2. So these might be precast planks or perhaps a wall module. Then we have other structural, which is 3, which is perhaps precast columns, which is maybe our hot rolled steelwork. 4, not one I've done personally yet, which is 3D printing, but is certainly being utilized further in the further across the industry. Section or category 5, I should say, is pre-manufactured components. So this might be a unitized facade where a cladding manufacturer has already pre-installed windows into the facade system, and then panels are craned into position. And then we get on to category 6 and 7, which are perhaps a little bit more traditional. What you're seeing, but it's an improvement on traditional techniques. So rather than laying bricks, utilizing brick slips perhaps, and rather than installing rebar, is using a rollout rebar system such as BAMTech. And then category 7, looking at some of the technological processes that we can utilize. Rather than sending an operative across a field for 2 or 3 days to go and survey a site, we can send drones out and in a matter of minutes come back with a lot of more data, and we can use perhaps 3D photo pin cloud Matterport cameras to survey buildings. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of all the different types of modern methods of construction. Next slide, please, Emily. So picking up on some of the benefits. Benefits are obviously need to align with what our clients require from their buildings. So they can often reduce program time, it can reduce program risk and reliance on weather. We can obviously make sure we construct ahead of sequences. We can reduce the number of operatives on site, and we can reduce the number of operatives working at height, reducing noise and dust and vibration, and generally improving safety. I'll come on to disruption on one of my example slides. We can get more predictable costs. We can scale. We can get economies of scale if we've got a program of works, perhaps. Reduce our prelims, install faster on site. We can look at quality. See, we've got factory quality components as opposed to components assembled in the middle of a wind-swept and cold and wet field. And quite often these projects will achieve an enhanced quality, 0 defects, and the like. We obviously need to consider our social value spend, as Dawn touched on earlier. And often the factories that produce the components for modern methods of construction are in deprived areas, which obviously helps to generate social value. And we obviously have less deliveries and less CO2, less waste produced on site, so generally better for the environment. So that we've covered a couple, or that we've looked at the so we've looked at the categories, we've looked at some of the benefits. How does Kier do it? If we click onto the next slide. This isn't a big publicity presentation. Just thought I'd let you know how that we approach it at Kier. We don't have a factory of our own. We don't have an order book in terms of number of components to manufacture. But what we have is called the Choice Factory. So we see ourselves as a project integrator, where we look at what our clients want from their projects, and we look at our supply chain to generate what is the best outcome or the best system to utilize for any given project. There's a link there, which when you get the presentation, you can click on, which will take you through to our Choice Factory literature, and it helps you to understand what the options might be for any given project. We only use them when there's benefits to be achieved, and we see ourselves as an integrator and certainly not a manufacturer. If you click on to the next slide, please, pick up our supply chain. So as you can see on this map of the UK here, and certainly it isn't limited to the UK because we have suppliers from overseas as well, but this sort of gives you a flavour for where you can find delivery or supply chain who will deliver modern methods of construction from Cornwall right the way up into Scotland and across over into Ireland as well. Again, that's publicly accessible on our corporate website. Next slide, please, Emily. So how do we take all of that expertise and knowledge and supply chain and apply it to any given project? We have a workshop that we can run, and we'd like to run that preferably around a sort of REBA stage 2 or earlier if possible, to help to influence strategy of any given project. We've developed this into 9 modules, and if I very quickly go through those, it'll give you a flavour of how the workshop works. First of all, we look at our clients' focus and vision, so we get them to define what they want from their project. We look at the design status and some of the drivers. We look at the programme, so if there are any constraints around that programme. We look at the site's logistics, so understanding the practicalities perhaps of moving larger components around the site. And then we start in modules 5 and 6 to get into looking at what that methodology might look like. So exploring different components, the merits of each of the categories, and then in module 6, actually start to identify what those platforms look like and potential sub-assemblies. And we like to do this collaboratively with the client, with the design team, or all in the same room or virtual room, as we have done for the last couple of years. And then we look at those proposals and we link them back to the original client's value proposition to make sure that they are going to achieve what the client's setting out to achieve. We then look at what the supply chain interaction needs to look like with critical packages where we need to support the design team to go away and essentially seek their expertise. We have a look at any other considerations, but the important thing from this workshop is a collaborative forward plan, which we put together and then we circulate to the team at the end of the workshop. So with the however many minutes, 5 minutes I've got remaining, I thought I'd show you a couple of examples. So if you click on to the next one, thanks Emily. This is example number 1. This is actually a live construction site. I know it looks rather clinical, and it doesn't look like most sites. In fact, that it's so clean and tidy. What you've got to the left is a live hospital site with a dark red brick, and just over to the right by the little down arrows are some occupied houses. So this is, as I say, Golden Jubilee. There was a £500,000 premium the client was willing to pay for a fully precast frame and facade. However, this resulted in a 6-month programme and prelim saving. It only took 22 weeks from the ground floor slab to watertight, and then there was a further 6-week improvement to be generated on the next phase. There was reduced welfare costs, obviously due to lower headcount. There was only 25 people on site at any one time, and this is actually during a site visit, which is why you've got quite so many people stood out the front. There was reduced rework and there was reduced defective works. There was reduced waste, as you can see from the photos. There's no real materials lying around, no skips, because they just weren't needed. And this was the big one, the reduced disruption to the neighbouring houses and the live hospital. And the client also paid an additional £90,000 to cast in half and channels into the soffits of the slabs so that MEP could be fixed into place without the additional dust and noise and vibration generated by all that drilling. So that you can see is a pretty clinical site at NHS Golden Jubilee. You click on, please, Emily. We go to the other end of the scale. MMC doesn't have to be solely for new build. It doesn't have to be particularly large value packages. We can still get benefits by perhaps specifying an IPS system that's pre-cut and prepared off-site and just simply assembled on-site. That's in a refurbishment. If you click on to the next one. So example 3 is actually at the Nightingale Hospital that we delivered in Bristol. And this is what I referred to. Off-site doesn't necessarily mean that it's away from site. This was the prefabrication for the MEP in the hospital, in the car park just outside the hospital. So it was literally 50 yards that each of the sub-assemblies were then carried and fitted into place. Next one, please, Emily. And then obviously some of the building services are quite considerable. We often work with our partners here. This is T. Clark's prefabrication of main service distributions, which we use time and time again on our larger schemes, where essentially the pipework and main distribution is all prefabricated in these large skids, which are then craned into the site and then connected up. And I think then we come on to my last slide, which hopefully should mean I finish on time. A couple of last examples here, examples 5 and 6. Offsite manufacture of the Trago turrets. Those of you who are familiar with Trago mills, you know that there's a number of turrets on them. When we constructed their latest store, they had 15 of these different turrets, and the thought of having to construct those on a very fast-paced program on site was going to sort of add quite a significant amount of time. So they're actually all made off-site in GRP, and then brought to site and erected into the right position. And then the project on the right, which is St. Loy's Extra Care Facility, which we've just finished for Exeter City Council, is all made using concrete crosswall. So the precast walls and floor panels are poured down in Cornwall, brought to site and put into place with that large crane. So it reduces the amount of noise and dust and vibration right next to a school and very, very close to occupied homes, as you can see by the little arrows. Hopefully that gives you a whistle-stop tour. I think we've got 45 seconds left, but I'll hopefully pick up any questions in the Q&A. Back to you, Mary.
Always helps if you unmute and put yourself on video before you start speaking. So just some key questions that often crop up when we're talking to prospective clients. Can I approach a framework supplier directly to talk about my requirements? Of course you can. Yes, it's wise to do so, or we'll do that with you. As I said earlier, it's very much these days, you know, big projects. And understanding that contractors, suppliers have order books, you know, that are sometimes filled, but they're not just sitting on a shelf waiting for you to pick them off. What form of contract do I have to use? We don't mind what form of contract you use. It is up to you to decide on the prime contract between yourself and the supplier, as long as you're all agreed on it. Do I have to become a member of South West Procurement Alliance to use the framework? The answer is no. If you do become a member, you get access to our community benefit fund, so that's useful, and also to become part of our client reference group, so it's sort of defining and formulating frameworks for the future. But there's no absolute requirement to do that. At what stage do I register a project with SWPA? Formally register it? Well, you would do that once you were reasonably sure that you were going to use the framework as a procurement route. You are not obliged to follow that procurement route at any stage up until you sign the final contract with the supplier. But obviously, you know, you have to, for due diligence purposes and for audit purposes, if you are going to go down the selection process using our frameworks, then you should register the project at that stage, which you're reasonably sure you're going to be doing so. What are the fees for using the framework? The fees are collected by very commonly used methodology, a levy of the supplier once the contract is in place, based on their turnover through the project. Currently, the fees are at 1% for this framework for lower value projects, and then we always discuss, depending on the size of the project, you know, whether there are any differences we can make to that. There are a number of framework suppliers on the work stream I'm interested in. I would like to do an initial sift. Can I do that? Well, through the expression of interest form that you fill out when you are actually registering the project. You can say if there are any specific requirements you have that you would like those suppliers to meet. So you can sort of be very clear at that stage, you know, what qualities, what particular abilities, what particular solutions you would like. So you can do a sift that way, and it will be up to the suppliers, if you are going for a mini competition route, to opt in or out at that stage. But yes, so that's how that's done. Can I go on to the next slide? I think that's probably me done. Yes, get in touch for further questions. We're going to, as I say, send out the pack to everybody. So yes, we will be sending that out to you. So I don't know whether anybody's got any questions at the moment that they want to ask of either myself, Dawn, or Peter, or more generally. I do have a couple of questions that came in earlier, maybe just to kick things off. Dawn, you talked about your engagement with the education sector and schools. Is there one shining light project that you would like to sort of talk to us about and tell us what you've done with that project? Is she there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. I think James Brindley Academy is one that I'm very, very pleased with. James Brindley Academy is a specialist academy for young people who have mental health issues or special educational needs. These children and young people don't attend mainstream school. James Brindley Academy have got 11 sites across our city, from working in the Children's Hospital through to a special hospital unit for people that have eating disorders, and then the work that we've done across all of the sites, and we're trying to help people with autism or neurodiversity to access work and to overcome the barriers. So that's something that, you know, pleases me greatly, and it's something quite close to my heart with relationship to my own children as well. So you know, if we can get people with, you know, that really struggle to get into work, then that's, you know, a real plus for me.
Thank you, Dawn. That's lovely. And a question that came in for Peter was, you've talked about MMC and given us a whistle-stop tour of MMC, which is really useful. Do we always have to use MMC, or do you provide other forms of construction? What's your recommendation, and what are your thoughts on the matter?
Sure, thanks, Mary. So in straight answer to your question, no, you don't have to always use MMC, and no, we don't just do MMC. We use the different types where we can see a benefit to both ourselves and to our clients. So that's what the Choice Factory is all about in terms of our little workshop that we run through, is identifying the best use of each of those approaches to MMC for any client's given needs. So if they have a very, very tight program with on a tight site with lots of overlooking neighbours and issues around access, it may be that utilising an MMC approach is going to be beneficial. If they've got a completely different site, then we won't use it. But we'll analyse each of the projects on their own merits to see what benefits can be brought from that approach.
Thank you. One question actually from me, which is probably a bit relevant to Peter, is the whole passive house standards. And usually we use passive house standards for residential, and there's a big debate about whether you can achieve passive house standards using traditional. I know some clients have, but you've actually done a passive house leisure centre, haven't you, in Exeter?
Yeah,
yes.
Well,
so
interestingly, we've done both. We've done a passive house traditionally built, which is the leisure centre you're referring to.
Oh, it is, yes.
And then St Loy's, which was the one that my final example with the concrete cross wall, was also passive house, which perhaps failed to mention in the little presentation there. But you know, as you say, you don't have to use MMC to achieve passive house standards. I think what you need to do is to, and that said, we did use quite a number of modern methods of construction in St Loy's, which is the passive house leisure centre. but not in an obvious 3D volumetric type approach. So again, it's just it's a case of analysing each project and their specific requirements, and then coming up with the most appropriate solution. Which is why, as you mentioned earlier, early contractor engagement and getting your contractor on board early and benefiting from their knowledge and expertise is so useful. We had the benefit on both of those schemes from being involved early in the design process, so that we could influence and make sure that we gave the client, or both of those clients, the most appropriate solution. We've achieved passive house on the extra care facility with a concrete crosswall, simply because that gives us a nice airtight line to work with. But there's no concrete crosswall on the passive house leisure centre. That's done with a much lighter weight approach, using membranes and tapes as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking from a technical point of view, it must have been a nightmare to achieve the airtightness on the leisure centre if it was quite lightweight.
Well, it's a case of getting it right on the paper, or getting it right on the drawing board, in old speak. Working with the right consultants, working with the right experts and suppliers and supply chain. Then it was a case of educating every single member of site, every single member of staff who came to site, every operative, whether they were a ground worker or an electrician, were all provided passive house training, so they understood the part that they were playing in achieving the standard. So you might wonder why a ground worker would necessarily need to understand what passive house is all about, but the foundations on St Sidwell's Point were all wrapped in very, very thick insulation. The whole of St Loy's actually floats on an insulation raft, so there's no thermal bridge between the foundations and the building superstructure. And obviously electricians aren't always known for their tact when they're trying to create a hole for their cables to go through, so it was very important that they understood the reason why they were obviously asked to put their cables through grommets and specialist fixings, to make sure that they weren't then compromising any air lines that we needed to be in place. So once we'd trained everybody, then it was a case of managing that quality on site and making sure that people had we check and check again to make sure that we've installed as we need to.
Gosh, yes, no, I do understand the challenge. Dawn, I'm going to be selfish and ask a question of you around the TOMS value calculator. It has so many lines on it, doesn't it? Do you find that clients sort of take out lines and just focus on individual requirements?
Yes, so a client can choose whichever one they think is the most important to them. And then what does happen, we find when we get bids in coming in from different councils and local authorities, is that they actually add in their own as well.
Oh, right.
So for instance, Birmingham City Council put one in as instead of a national TOM, an NT, as a BT, so a Birmingham City Council TOM, and that was around period poverty, which was really important to them. And then we had the same in Bristol with something there. So people can add in something that's very specific, that impacts their local community, that they have a special interest in, as well as choosing from the myriad of TOMs that the national TOMs actually provide by the social value portal. So it is always bespoke, I think, depending on the area, because one size doesn't fit all. And if you're working in a deprived area and you've got something you really want to achieve, then obviously this is a really great way of engaging people to do so, and you can make it specific to you and to your council or local area.
And it does focus people's the client's mind on what is important to them, doesn't it, by doing that? I mean, we found it a very interesting exercise. Some of the calculations of values that come out are quite interesting, the bottom line.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at SMEs with the local proxies that are churned out from the national TOMs, then that is usually the biggest multiplier in there. So that's why it's so very important to use local SMEs wherever you can, because obviously that money also like everything, goes back into the local community, doesn't it? And it gets spent in the supermarkets or wherever. So it's like having the Bristol pound or the Birmingham pound or whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Well, we're now, I'm not seeing any other questions come in on the chat, which probably means no open questions, which probably means everybody feels they've had completely all the information they want. But if they haven't, then do get in touch, and we can answer your questions, either ourselves or Dawn or Peter, will have provided their email contacts on the presentation. We'll be very happy to answer any of your questions. So I'm just going to sign off now and leave you all with an extra 2 minutes to grab a cup of tea for your next activity. So thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to talking to you about your projects in the very near future. Bye bye.